And we're back. Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. Keeping it kind of off kilter. At the height of the Roman Empire, I think in the 3rd century, I could be off by 50 or 75 years, about 40% of the Roman population would move a significant distance, more than a couple hundred miles, at least once in their lives. Doesn't sound like much, does it? Doesn't sound super important? Think about this. A significant part of the Roman population was not small-town hicks. Could not be small-town hicks because they moved. A significantly larger part of that population was also not essentially small-town hicks because one or another of their parents had done that moving, or their husband or their wife had done that moving. It was a very largely transportation-based society. In America right now, our rates are about half of that. It gets better in the West and worse in the East, and there's a whole lot of variations, and some of them are socioeconomic, and some of them are honestly class-based, a lot of them are regional, but there you go. It's about half. This is a critical difference between an expansionist, healthy society and one that is not. It's arguable that the Roman civilization of that time would have continued on another several centuries in expansion before splintering. Probably not a decline, more of a splintering, if they had not had two major issues. And one of them involved the changes of Christianity in the south, and the other one was that the Romans basically fucked some of their allies, the Goths, and that was kind of bad news. Anyway, the Romans were a dynamic and growing and expanding society at that point in time. 100 years later, they were having issues. 200 years later, they were pretty much on the ropes. But it's not because of the transportation, and it's not because of anything surrounding the transportation. The transportation was key. The fact that 40% of the people moved really far away, equivalent to out of state in today's terms, that was a big deal. We're at half that in the United States. Transportation is a constitutionally guaranteed right. It's not an enumerated right in the Bill of Rights. However, it is a constitutional protection. You have the right to travel. Except you don't, really. Okay? And this is causing us some issues. This is causing us some very severe socioeconomic and just general social issues. Okay? A right to transportation means that I can reasonably expect to go from here to there. Right now, our roads are structured so that to go from here to there, you mostly really need to have access to a car or some other motor vehicle, or you need to fly, or you need the money for a train. It's not, and a bus is not really an option for what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a 1-mile trip, okay? You can just walk that. Or we're talking about 40, 80, 300, 600, 2,000 miles. Or you could, of course, get on a plane if you have the right government-approved internal passport. Thank you, Real ID and Patriot Act. Not a good thing. The right to travel, the right to access your own federal government buildings is being restricted by that Real ID Act, but that's a different video. The right to travel is being restricted in ever-increasing ways, and some of those restrictions are very much class-based or socioeconomic class-based. I don't want to say race-based because I don't think that's true. It's red lines, okay? This is part 2 of that little series where we're going to get into red lines and environmentalism. Transportation is a key right, and it is a key necessity to improving one's station in life, to having access to options, to not being redlined. And we've got it to the point right now where you pretty much need to have a driver's license or you're stuck. Or you need to have a real ID or you're stuck. No internal passport, no go. This is bad news. It's bad news. And I have some potential answers to that. I have some suggestions to you, things you might want to bring up with lawmakers. And we'll get into that in about 5 seconds. Get rid of driver's licenses and make them more restrictive at the same time. Sounds crazy? Well, here's an idea, all right? The idea behind a driver's license is that you need to know that someone is competent to not kill people and damage property with a 5,000-pound ground-based missile. I understand that. But what if it's not a 5,000-pound ground-based missile? I think that you should have no licensing requirements whatsoever for a vehicle that weighs under 400 pounds, 450 pounds, develops less than 15 horsepower, and has a top speed of around, let's call it 45, 50 miles an hour. Basically, you're not a danger, you're not a threat at that level. You still have to obey laws. You can still be pulled over and cited. You can be arrested. You can still get a DUI. Whatever it is, okay? I'm not talking about complete anarchy here. And I usually get a response, oh, well, you're just going to see some guy driving his John Deere lawnmower down the shoulder of the highway. Yeah, you are. And that's okay. All right? Right to travel. That's not a problem. Now, you then go up and you make a tiered system. So you have to have some sort of basic license and insurance requirement. Not even license, but a certification that you have taken a education course of some sort. Operator's course of some sort. But not an actual license. Just that certification. It's good for 10 years or 5 years or whatever. And you can carry a minimum of insurance if it's really necessary. And that gets you the next step up. Call it 1,000 pounds, 80 horsepower. All right? Now you're talking about a Honda Civic, old style, the old Honda Civic, not the new bloated ones. I'm talking like 78 Honda Civic here. You can get on the freeway, you can go. Okay? The world is your oyster. Then, if you want to drive something bigger, we start adding requirements, okay? If you actually want to drive an F350 dually, I think the licensing requirements should be closer to a CDL than a Class C license. I would really love to see the really large vehicles be more heavily restricted in terms of licensing. But in order for that to happen, you have to give in at the bottom. You have to give people a way to get around. So, that's a basic thing. A lot of people don't like this idea. They really don't like it. They're scared to death that someone might do something without a license. They're literally scared to death that someone might do something without a license. But you need that. You need to have that liberty, that freedom of movement, the individual independence. Okay? So, that's an answer. Transportation is a problem. Cost, barrier to entry. The barrier to entry for transportation right now is extreme. Okay? You might want to say, oh, but anyone can ride a bike. But no, not everyone can ride a bike, and bikes are not always suitable. Everyone can have a scooter. They're not licensed. They are licensed. In a lot of states, they're licensed. Here in Nevada, they're officially unlicensed, except you have to have a license plate. It doesn't have registration tags or an expiration date, but you still have to get the license plate and have a title. This is theoretically to prevent theft, but it's just government control because in 2 or 3 years they're going to make you have annual registration. They always do this. It's incremental. It's government. And you are supposed to, in Nevada, have a valid Class C operator's permit, a driver's license, in order to have your unlicensed moped on the road. Which is stupid. Okay, lots of states are this bad or worse. California has some crazy restrictions that make it so that the electric bicycle I had when we were there was actually illegal and I got ticketed. It's just stupid, okay? Now, this barrier to entry idea, this is where we're talking about red lines again, okay? It should be obvious what you're doing by creating this barrier to entry for basic transportation is you're locking people in the ghetto, the barrio, their neighborhood, their small rural town. Whatever it is, you're locking them in unless they have all the stuff to go drive a car. And the driving license rates for the millennials are kind of down, and there are a lot of people who are actually failing in this. And we're going to get to that later on in the next video, because that gets into the idea that people are against personal ownership of vehicles, which is one of the reasons we can't have electric cars. But I'm not touching on that one just yet. So, that's it. That's what you got. And that's just a necessity to maintain the idea that we have freedom to travel in this society. And there's a lot of dynamic, expansionist, educational, societal, and peaceful reasons to actually want this to happen. Stay sideways. Have a good one.